Today is September 10, 2022, and today is the average first frost date for our area. And so I am doing a garden tour for today. Parts of our province did actually get a frost warning last night, but it did not include our area. So we did hit 5 degrees last night, but we did not get frost. So this being September, our crabapple tree over here has been very productive. We've picked about 20 to 30 gallons of apples from it, and have hard apple cider being made and apple cider vinegar. And today I just canned a whole bunch of jars of crabapple sauce. The first major change since the last garden tour video I made is that we had chippers come in and clean up a whole bunch of branch piles. And we now have all kinds of wood chips available. It took them 8.5 hours to get all the branch piles cleared up. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And as you can see, we've made good use of the piles so far. Most of it has gone around the silver buffalo berry that we planted, and at the end we got the high bush cranberry mulched, and the sea buckthorn is also mulched. With the sea buckthorn, it looks like we're down to only 2 surviving plants. There's this one over here, and this one over here, and the rest just haven't made it. The one that broke didn't survive. Speaking of which, of our 2 high bush cranberry, the one that got eaten by a deer before and was recovering got eaten by a deer again. I don't know if it's going to make it, but hopefully they'll finally leave it alone. So here we are at the trellises, which we will not be using next year. We're just leaving the peas at this point because there's no point in pulling them up. If there's any left, they can go to seed. The cucumbers are finishing off. There's not a whole lot left. Now that things are cooling, things are not ripening quite as quickly as they normally would have been. The second sowing of peas has kind of taken on a new life, with all kinds of new growth and stuff like that. We're leaving them as well to go to seed. The big winner this year seems to be the Ozark nest egg. There is at least a dozen of these gourds that will ripen, plus it's still producing. The purple and green pole beans are basically done for the year. They produce quite well under the circumstances. I'm quite happy with these varieties that we got. It took a very long time, but these hull-less pumpkins did finally start producing, and we should have at least 2, maybe 3 fully ripe pumpkins before the end of the growing season. Things are supposed to warm up for the next while, so there is a chance that they will finish ripening. These ones are the Styrian hull-less pumpkin. Another winner for this year is the Tennessee dancing gourds. There are just so many gourds growing. And amazingly, the loofah is still growing. The male flowers are finally starting to bloom, which isn't quite timing right with the female flowers over here. Let's get that in focus. As for the red noodle beans, they are only just now starting to bloom. See that? And then we have the canteen gourds at the end here, which have basically perked up and taken on new life over here. One of them even has a developing gourd. And then we have the shelling beans, which are drying up quite nicely. I still think they're way smaller than they would be normally, but we're going to have beans. I'd say there's something wrong with this thermometer. There is no way it's that warm out right now. Another group of plants that recovered quite nicely are the Lady Godiva Hollis pumpkins. We should have a couple, I hope, fully ripe pumpkins before the end of the season. And the Latte bicolor corn is actually producing corn pretty well. We did pick some. It was a bit too early, so I don't know if they're actually tasty or not. But we'll leave them and see how well they do as time goes by. Meanwhile, underneath the latte corn are the green bush beans that we planted, which we have been harvesting beans from, but it's a pain in the butt to get under there, and we planted them for the corn as nitrogen fixers. So I'm just going to go ahead and let them go to seed. The Boston marrow are another one that seemed to recover quite well. Would have been nice if they recovered fully, but there's just not going to happen. But we do have a couple of Boston marrows developing. There's the biggest one right there that we might have enough growing season left for them to finish. The Tom Thumb corn. Well, we'll see what we get. They're just so tiny, but they're not a large variety anyways. Meanwhile, we have our... Oh, would you look at that? There's a bee. This is the G-Star Patty Pan Squash. And aside from this one here that got killed by a cutworm, they have recovered and are producing some lovely patty pans. The all blue potatoes are a later maturing variety, and some of them are actually still looking like they're growing, and some bloomed not that long ago. And then the melons in beside, we got this one Zucca melon that's trying to thrive. The rest, they're there, but that's it. The Bridget variety of potatoes that we planted are a medium season variety, and they're ready to harvest now. I actually do not expect to get much of anything under here. And, well, the melon patch, nothing going on here. Just a few barely surviving. The Tropina lunga onions are doing quite well in here, but the chard that I planted later on for a fall crop, the grasshoppers have just decimated it, so I didn't plant anything else in here. It wasn't worth it. Here we have the little finger eggplants surrounded by the red of Florence onions, and all I can say is they're alive. The other half of the bed, I was intending to plant spinach in here, but just decided against it. I planted spinach elsewhere. Here we have some more red of Florence onions. They're ready to start harvesting. A couple of Moldova that are slowly ripening. And then we have our purple peppers, which we actually do have a couple of peppers trying to ripen on there. There's another one. Where is it? Hiding under there. So that's, well, I don't know, a semi-success, I guess. This is where we planted the earlier maturing Carib potatoes. It was awful. It was really horrible. I picked fewer potatoes than we planted. I had the hardest time just getting the fork into the ground. Yeah, because I keep hitting rocks. This is all, yeah, rocks. And on top of that, tree roots, because go figure. Okay, over here the yellow onion sets that we planted are ready for harvesting. Those poor turnips are just barely making it. The grasshoppers and other insects are devastating them. The carrots, I've harvested some of the golden Uzbek ones, but the Black Nebula are such long carrots that I'm just going to leave them until it's time to just harvest the entire bed all at once. Here we have our Cup of Moldova tomatoes and Sophie's Choice tomatoes that are ripening slowly, very slowly. We've been picking them little by little as they ripen and sticking them in the freezer so that I'll have enough to make a big batch of tomato paste for canning later on. The Covington sweet potatoes, they did try to recover, but my goodness, they're just so tiny. Just not happening. But we do have some little finger eggplants, but just on one plant, and then that one is blooming. The summer squash bed has not produced anywhere near as much as it normally would have. We did get more of the Magda squash than we used to in past years, but even then it's just not very much in total. And I was really looking forward to more of these yellow patty pan squash. Sunburst squash is the variety. And I was hoping for more zucchini too, but they're not doing too well at all. This one plant is the only one that's somewhat recovered. But the male and female flowers are just not blooming in time. I haven't even really been able to hand pollinate them all that much. As for the winter squash, we are only now, this is the Teddy squash, that very tiny variety, finally starting to develop male and female flowers at the same time, and it's just, I don't expect to get anything out of them. Here we have some Georgia candy roasters. Look at slime trails all over from the slugs. Oh, something ate one of the baby squashes. We do have some ripe baby Pam pumpkins, and more are developing. They really tried to recover and did pretty good as far as that goes. Last year, the Crespo squash did so very well even after being decimated by animals twice. And this year, there's just, oh, they're horrible. The poor things. Look at the slime trails all over from the slugs. The Kakai pumpkins recovered better, and we do have more pumpkins developing. I'm going to see under here. And this one, this one little one, is actually ripe. The giant pumpkin is petering off for this season. Got one orange one there and one that's turning orange, and that's all we got out of it, 2 pumpkins. And I'm okay with that. These are pretty big. I'm kind of surprised by the apple gourds, because right now there are so many gourds developing all over the place, and they're blooming and being pollinated. And yes, I've been hand pollinating them as well, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, they just up and decided to thrive all of a sudden. Whether or not they have enough time still, well, we'll see. This is where we had one of the branch piles that got cleaned up. Over here, nice blank spot now. And this is where a second pile was. It's so nice to have those piles gone. The Wonderberry were a bit of a surprise. It turns out that they bloom continually and produce berries continually. So the 3 plants, all things considered, are doing surprisingly well. The Aunt Molly's ground cherry has been doing quite well. We've been harvesting from them a fair bit every couple of days, and they are absolutely delicious. I love them. The coulis corn is quite tall, as you can tell, and developing tassels, but there are no cobs developing anywhere that I can see. We did have some issues not too long ago with high winds that knocked a bunch of them down, and the netting that we put around to protect from critters is the only thing that kept it from falling over. The yellow bush beans underneath them, we're just leaving them now. They're not really producing anymore. Anything that's left, we'll just let them go to seed. The yellow pear tomatoes, the plants are just really, really strong and massive. This whole thing winds blew it over and it was just leaning over this path over here. So I had to kind of force it to lean in the other direction. But we've been gathering ripe tomatoes from here fairly regularly. As for the onions underneath, they're not doing very well at all. I think they're just too shaded out. But yeah, I had to arrange it to pull the supports over to one side so that they wouldn't be falling into the corn. And then in this bed over here, we had the garlic that got harvested a while ago, and so this bed is ready to be prepared for next year. Here we have the sunchokes, which have not bloomed yet. They should have by now. I'm not sure if we're going to get anything out of them or how they work. We've never grown them before. But yeah, we'll see if we get mature tubers out of them. As for the strawberries and the asparagus, they did not do particularly well this year. It was the first year for the strawberries, but yeah, they didn't do too well, likely because of the flooding. Along here we have the chocolate cherry tomatoes, which we have been picking fairly regularly now. The girls assure me that they are the tastiest of the tomatoes we're growing this year. The carrots, I'm just leaving them to pick all at once later on. They are frost hardy and we'll just let them be. There's just a couple of shallots left, 2 of which have gone to seed. But the shallots and onions are pretty much a loss in here. But at least we'll get some more tomatoes before the frost finally does hit. And then here we have some Kyoto Red tomatoes that we're letting them go to seed. There's a couple of them gone to seed. And we're also allowing these King Tut purple peas to go to seed. And this is the red curry squash or little gem squash. They are doing all right. Most of them are looking pretty much ripe now. And I'm really looking forward to these. They look like ornaments. Our one self-seeded purple fingerling potato from last year is still making it. We will leave that be for a little while longer before digging up and seeing what's under it. As for the grapes, I did actually harvest some this morning, though as you can see, some are not ripe yet. But we do have grapes this year. And the old kitchen garden is doing its thing. The mint in the blocks are doing all right. This single bush bean, I'm just leaving it to go to seed. The onions that we planted in the blocks, the cats have dug them up and used them as cat litter. The first spinach that I sowed in here, the cats knocked the netting down and rolled on it, and so everything got squished and they did not recover. On this side, there are a few that are trying to grow, and some on here. The cats are still trying to use the netting as their own personal hammocks. Meanwhile, we've left some lettuce to go to seed. A couple of each variety. These lettuces are still growing. But the beets, they look like a complete loss. It just did not work this year. And then we have the breadseed poppy over there. I'm going to be working on that bed to make it more of a raised bed and try and get rid of the weeds that were growing in there. And oh, we are being watched. Hello, baby. Pretty boy. We are currently in the outer yard right now, which is where we planted the Korean pine that I neglected to record previously. And there's a possibility of the renter allowing his cows into here, and so we've covered them with these cages painted with high-vis orange paint. Of the 6 Korean pine that we planted, there are unfortunately only 4 left, as you can see here. Normally I would have a lane to that gate over there mowed in here and all the way around to join up with the driveway around there, but this was just completely full of water this spring, and there's just no way to catch up with the mowing after that, which is why I hope the renter does allow his cows in here.